I was being careful. And being careful does not result in your best shooting. It results in careful shooting, which again, it's like here or there, but there's an element of caution there that makes you shoot a little bit more consciously, and it doesn't allow you to let go. And so I was thinking about that after, and I'm pretty sure that that's what had happened to me, because I'm like, I know that if I do this, I'll end up on the super squad again.
Welcome to the Firearms Nation podcast and also the YouTube channel if you are watching this live on YouTube. As you recall, this year I started doing all these interviews live simply because I wanted to challenge myself with doing things live and knowing that at any second I could screw up. No, seriously. I do it live because I want people to be able to share the experience that I have with the interview. And since I have such a diverse group of people that come on the show, maybe you want to talk to them. So maybe you have some questions. At the end of all this, you can ask the questions of my guests, and time permitting, of course, they'll get to it. If not, they'll add it in the comments. So if you are tuning in tonight, I know it was kind of short notice, but I am joined by Jay Beal, who is a top competitor in USPSA practical shooting. He just got back from Carry Optics Nationals, so that's the red dot on the gun. I think it was about out of 500 people, he came in 10th, so it's a top 10 finish for him, which is incredibly challenging. I heard it was a very, very difficult match this year, so we'll get into that with him. And you know, he's also part of Team Steve Anderson, if that's the actual team name. But I just want to, shout out to Steve, because I owe a lot to Steve, and a friend of his is definitely a friend of mine. So without further ado, Jay, welcome to the show again.
Thank you, Arik, for having me back on. It has been a while, which is good. I don't know, a lot has happened with you, and a lot's been changing for me and everybody. But yeah, it's cool to be back on.
Yeah, so I looked it up, obviously, for this show, and you were on almost 3 years ago to the day. So that's pretty incredible how time has flown. Basically, it was the whole COVID generation. Those years, I think it was right around COVID when this happened. So, but you're pretty isolated where you're at, so I'm sure. Hopefully it wasn't that much of an effect on you.
Yeah, we're pretty far away from everything. And so besides just traveling around a little bit, we were in the clear with stuff. So.
Well, what's very cool is that this time around, last time when we talked about it briefly before we went live, but last time it was challenging with your internet connection. I think we started and stopped like 5 times, and I can't. I think we had to switch over to Zoom from my other way I was recording it. So it was definitely. Now you look great. You're in your shooting dojo. I see all sorts of shooting stuff in the background and a green basketball. Obviously, that's your kids, right?
That's my personal green basketball. No, that's my kids. Yeah, yeah. I was just testing you in the last podcast just to make sure that you could handle lots of different scenarios. No, I think we have fiber optic internet. It's really nice. I've never had nice internet, so this is new.
Well, I'm glad, except most people, I mean, you're still, if I'm not mistaken, you're still a farmer, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That is what I do. Blueberry farm, and mostly, and then they have goats as well. And so I take care of the goats. I milk the goats.
Well,
it's pretty good.
That's an amazing thing. I think, I grew up in the Midwest, and I always, there's nothing like more relaxing, in my opinion, than just being like in a cornfield. I know that sounds really weird, but just, like when the wind is blowing, there's nobody around, and just, it's like the stalks are blowing back. I don't know. It's just, there's kind of something very serene about it. It's kind of meditative. So,
absolutely.
I totally get it. And of course, I appreciate all farmers. for what they do. So thank you for that. But I haven't received any of my blueberries. So
No, I probably promised you blueberries, didn't I?
yeah, I eat blueberries every day.
So do I. Yeah.
Well,
Frozen
I hope
blueberries
so.
every day. I know.
But before I start getting complaints, I had someone complain that was talking too much about food with less smartoni. Let's talk about why people want to be here. They want to hear about Jay and his accomplishments. So last time we talked, you had finished really well was that your first Optics Nationals?
Yeah, that was my first Optics Nationals. I think the year before I had just made GM. I can't remember, but it was my first Nationals. I think second match I'd ever traveled to, or flown to, and I was fifth, I believe. It's 2020 Nationals at about 90%. And then I did not go in 2021 because my wife had our second child. So
which is great.
Pretty good. And it was around that time, I probably could have squeezed it in, but I think that in this kind of circumstance, it's best not to do that for everyone's happiness.
So you have a place to live? Yeah, of course.
Of course.
So back then, I know it was popular, but I think Optics has taken off tenfold in the past 3 years. It is by far the biggest division.
Yeah, 2022 was huge. I think there were 400 and some competitors there, and then 2023 this year, even bigger, with even more of the kind of the top names showing up and shooting, which is exactly what I want, and I think it's exactly what people want to see, and it's what people want to be a part of. So it's very cool.
So is that why? I mean, you fit what was like 92% this year? Was that where you came out?
I think so, 92%. And the year before, 2022 was like 93%. I think that there's different people in relative to the winner last year. My percentage went up, and then we had a new winner this year. So
yeah, surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, he won, but that came out of left field. Did you know that Christian Seiler took the championship? Did you know that he was going to be entering?
Well, so I was really, I think early on I saw his name come up on practice score on the squads, and I was really hoping that he would stay there. I think 2022 he was squatted at one point and then came out, or 21 it was that. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, I mean that's what we want. We want the people that are in the running showing up for these matches, and he did, and we are all very happy. Maybe not everybody. I think we want to compare ourselves against the current best in the divisions, and that's what we got.
So Christian won the World Shoot in Open, and
yes.
I guess a lot of what he's doing in Open carried over into shooting a red dot on a stock type gun.
Yeah, Christian. So Christian, and I think he will tell me if he disagrees, but he's fundamentally a very good shooter, and so he is very in command of wherever he looks, wherever the dot is, he can pull the trigger and the shots go there. Which it's very simple. It sounds simple, but it's not easy to do. But so his fundamentals are very strong, and so in Optics, like a minor division, he does very well. He's got great points, and his time is there from Open, and so there's a lot to learn from him and a lot to learn from everyone. Yes.
Were you squatted on the Super Squad this year? I didn't get a chance to see.
Yeah, I was. They actually split it into two Super Squads. So there was Super Squad A and B, and so A was the Super Squad formed of the shooters who finished in the top 10 or 12 from the year before, and then there was Super Squad B, which was Christian and then Jacob Hetherington, and some other of the AMU guys who finished very well, and I think Andrew Hyder was on that squad. A whole bunch of other people. I mean, there was enough at this match to fill probably 2 or 3 super squads. And so they split it in that way that you could have 2 super squads that would be separated just by a few stages.
So going into this match, I listened to the podcast you did with Steve in preparation for this, and you sounded very confident about, I mean, I think mentally you were already ready to shoot at that point. I don't think there was much you could have done differently. But looking back at the actual performance, what would you, I mean, you did win a stage, if I'm not mistaken. You won what, the standard stage?
Yeah, I won stage 5 in zone 1, which was, the standard stage, which I think it's a classifier. I think it's 0318. I don't know the number exactly, but it's one, or maybe it's 99 series. I'm not sure.
But tell people who don't know what a standard stage is and which one what you actually had to do for it to win.
Yeah. So a standard stage, and they'll have them set up at different times, but usually, in the USPSA classification system, they used to have a lot of standard stages. So that means typically you'll draw in this circumstance, it was 15 yards, and you shoot two shots on 3 different targets. And then you perform like a mandatory reload, and you shoot, again, 2 shots on each target, strong hand only. And then you split it in 2 strings. So then you go up to the 10-yard line in this instance and shoot 2 on each, mandatory reload, and then transfer over to your weak hand and shoot 2 on each again. And that was this instance for a standard stage, but they come in a lot of different forms. So, and I think there was a couple at this match.
So what did you do specifically in your mind, performance-wise? We'll talk about the whole match, but you won the stage. So why do you think you won? Why do you think you won over someone like Christian over this?
I mean, I think this is a pretty fundamental kind of exercise for the 12 drills that Steve has. I think this is drills 11 and 12. Yeah, from Refinement and Repetition, which is Steve's first book. And I did these drills. I still do them to just a different degree now, but for pretty much 3 years straight. And so I went into that stage with a lot of confidence. Like I knew before the match, because they released these stages. I knew that there was going to be this stage, and I figured, I'll probably do pretty well in that stage. I didn't think I was going to win it necessarily or anything like that, but I knew that I would do well on it just because I'm really familiar with the gun handling stuff. And then I've shot that before because it's a classifier. We see it in matches. So I kind of know what the hit factor is and how that plays.
So at this level, you bring up hit factor. You're calculating all this stuff while you're doing your stage plan.
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily. Like when I know it, like I knew the factor on this classifier. I knew that I can shoot it probably, between 8.5 and 9.5 factor. And so in this instance, I knew it. And then to my degree on other stages, I'll know if the factor is really low or not. If it's like a 4 or 5, I'll know that typically. And if it's really high, then I'll know that. But I'm generally not calculating that myself. I know others are.
Yeah, I've seen that with some of these guys, and they're just trying to calculate. I can only drop this many points at this place, and I'll do better at this stage because it's got a higher hit factor. I'm like, it's so complicated. I just want to do well and hit all the targets at this point.
I mean, I'll look at a stage and I'll look at all the targets and say, these 2 targets right here, these are pretty tight partials. If I shoot 2 Charlie on each of those, I have 4 Charlie for the stage. The rest of the targets are open targets, I know I'll get all alphas there, or probably, and I'll probably pick up Alpha Charlie on the partial anyway. So that tells me, and maybe the factor's a little bit higher, and I'll say, okay, so for those 2 partials, I'm not even going to attempt to get alphas on those. So there would be my 4 Charlies for the stage, and everything else. So it just simplifies the shooting in a sense where I'm like, okay, I don't even have to think about trying to get risky on those partials. And then if it's all partials, then it becomes a little bit different. Maybe it's all partials, there's a lot of running in between. Then you have to start to think about if it's worth it to pick up the alphas or not. Or take a little bit more risk, but even then it's not really risk, it's just adding time.
So for this match, getting back to the original question, in your performance, what do you think you could have done better, or could you have done anything better?
Oh yeah, there are always things, and I think the biggest piece of it was that, and I realized this after that I shot. So I was shooting at the Super Squad for the first time. I had made it in 2020, but then didn't go in 2021, and then so they take the previous year only. So in 2021, I wasn't there, or sorry, in 2022, I was not on the Super Squad, and so. Anyway, this is my first time on the Super Squad. And so in the back of my mind, and I didn't realize until the match was over, is I'll just do enough to put myself back on the Super Squad. I don't need to do anything more. And so there were times throughout the match where I was being careful. And being careful does not result in your best shooting. It results in careful shooting, which again, it's like here or there, but there's an element of caution there that makes you shoot a little bit more consciously, and it doesn't allow you to let go. And so I was thinking about that after, and I'm pretty sure that that's what had happened to me, because I'm like, I know that if I do this, I'll end up on the Super Squad again. And that's not really, that's not really fair to myself, because it's putting a limiter on my ability. But again, I don't know. It's okay. Like, the result's not horrible. I think between 6th or between 7th and 12th or whatever is a very, very small point margin, and so it could have been anywhere in there. But I think to put yourself up into 4th or 3rd, there's a lot more points that need to be picked up. And I'm talking about match points. So not necessarily just on target, but, being faster and more accurate overall through the whole match. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but that's the biggest thing. And it's just a mental thing.
Well, of course, if you're having mental issues, you should contact Steve.
I know. So Steve hopefully is listening to this, and he'll text me, so it'll be good. But I will. I actually have, because this was more recent, and Steve and I were going to do a podcast too. And so anyway, we'll all talk about it. It'll be good.
I don't want to take anything away from Steve, because, like I said, I owe him so much. And that's a plug for, if you have any. I've done his mental management course, and I've used it and I've told him too, I've used it in other things other than shooting, because that those principles can apply to a lot of different goals that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, they apply to everything.
So you did answer something about you put a limiter on yourself. Something else, a lot of times at these matches, especially if you've been around for a while, there are people that are chasing you, but then there's other people that you're chasing. And if you don't want to name names, you don't have to, but was that person at the match with you?
I don't know. So I don't, for me, I don't necessarily chase people, but in the sense that, like, it's not one person. If you're up in a certain order, you're like, well, that's that run on that stage. That's a good run. And so there's temptation to chase good runs. But for people in particular, I don't necessarily pick people to chase. I think that there's people that you would like to see your name above in the results. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, that wasn't something that I picked out.
No, I mean, I get it. And again, you don't have to say names, but I'm sure, you've been around now for a little while. I know people are probably saying, I know you're kind of isolated and you're in the farmland, but they see you at the matches and they see you winning and they're like, oh, I want to do better than Jay did this year. So you got to target me, especially, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't shoot a lot of other level 2 or 3 matches. So, nationals is usually the only spot that you'll get to compete against me. So it's pretty good.
Now I was going to say, you're wearing, the Walther hat. Are you sponsored by them now?
Yeah. So, Walther actually last year, I think it's been about a year that I've been shooting with them. So, and I was resistant for a little while. I think a couple of years ago, I was contacted and was like, do you want to shoot the PDP? And I was like, nah. And then I was contacted again. I think I said no again. But then I was like, all right, fine, send me a gun. And then I shot it and I was like, oh, well, this is pretty good. And so I started shooting with them and it's been really good. It's been very helpful as well.
How do you have it set up? Now, this isn't the Q, right? This is just the regular PDP.
Yeah, this is the regular, the full size PDP, the 5-inch,
5-inch, right.
5-inch full size. So this is where I talk about springs and stuff, right?
Well, there's going to be an
springs.
aspect of the show. I know we were talking a little bit of the esoteric about, limiting yourself, but there are people who gear out and like to see, hey, this person's I get it. People are having success with something, whether it's, the type of shoes that they're wearing or the holster they're using or what spring they're using or what bullet weight, and what gun. So, I mean, there are people who do like to know that. And it's also an affirmation for all the people who are shooting Walther that, the guy can actually shoot a gun. So, so you could talk a little bit about your springs if you want. I know he was like a 12-inch, not 12 pound or 15-pound spring.
Yeah, so the recoil spring, they come from the factory. They come a little bit oversprung, and that's just so that they can handle hotter stuff and be good to go. But put a 15-pound recoil spring in with an aftermarket guide rod that comes from, I think, ZRT.
Right.
So 15-pound recoil spring, and then I put in some I think a Spring Co trigger return spring. Which just makes the trigger a little bit lighter. And then stock striker spring, stock plunger spring. And then I did not change any other ones. So, it's just those two, recoil spring, and then the trigger return spring. And then I do, the biggest modification that I do is with the grip tape. And so I'll put, and part of it is connected, but I'll put they make brass back straps that go in, so it adds a little bit more balance to it, puts a little bit more weight in the back. So one of those is in there, and then I have skateboard tape on the grip, with a little bit of silicone carbide for USPSA that I can do that up further on the grip. And that's the biggest. If I was to do one thing, that would be it, is the silicone carbide or grip tape.
Well,
and that's pretty much it.
It's nice that they reached out to you, but my question is it that much of a better gun that you would switch your current platform or your previous platform to go to a different gun altogether? I mean, what was so great about the gun?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know that they would say this there as well. I mean, they're the Walther, the PDP is a really nice gun in a market that's full of really nice guns, and so it's hard to say that something is specifically better than everything else. But I think trying it for me, because I didn't try it before when I said no, but when I tried it, I was like, okay, this is cool. It fits my hand, because I was shooting a Glock before. It fits my hand. and the trigger is really nice. And I know Glock has come out with the trigger, their performance trigger now, which I think it's like very similar in that process. But this was before I was using that, and so I was like, it fits my hand. The dot shows up where it's the same. The grip angle wasn't a change for that, where I can still do a draw and the dot shows up where I'm looking. And the trigger was really nice. Just the stock trigger was really nice. And so I left it stock for a while. I think I shot 2022 with it, just totally stock. And so yeah, trigger and the grip is why I decided to switch.
What did you do to the trigger?
That trigger return spring. I think it's a little bit of a lighter trigger return spring from Spring Co. And that was it. It just made it so that the take up, there wasn't more resistance on the take up. So the wall and the break were the same, but you got to the wall without, with a little less resistance. And I'm just shooting the stock trigger right now. I think that even Walther makes their performance trigger, which is really nice as well.
And obviously this carry optics. So what red dot do you use?
The Trijicon, the SRO.
The SRO.
Did you find 5 MOA?
I know they'll come out with the Nationals, report on what people are shooting and what they're doing. But did you see the majority were the SROs? It seems like it's very popular these days.
Yeah, a lot of people shooting on the Super Squad. A lot of people shooting with the SROs. A lot of people shooting with the SIG dots, with the Romeo 3 Maxes, and then I think there were some people at this match as well that shot with the Hollow Sun competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that one's definitely something that's interesting as well. But yeah, I think I'm betting that the SRO will be on top of that list for at least this year's Nationals, but we'll see.
So preparations for, and of course, I'm sorry, someone texted me. Bullet weight. What are you shooting?
Oh, bullet. Okay, so previously I'd been shooting all the way up until Nationals, and forever I've been shooting 124s, or 125s. And then just recently I loaded up, and I did shoot this year's Nationals with 125s, but I loaded up a whole bunch of 135s from Summit City, and I really like those, so I'm switching to those.
Okay. So
it's kind of splitting the difference between 125 and 147. And so I've shot the 135s before and comparing them to the 147, and I don't think there's a big difference between those. And so the 135s seem really nice. And I think that it just slows the slide down enough where you can process some more information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of cool.
And so you like shooting the dot much more than shooting irons. I mean, you're still a young guy. You can shoot irons. Well, why stick to the red dot?
Because that's where all the competition is. So that's really the only reason. I initially, when I got into this, I started with a dot as well. I started with irons. But then people are like, well, the red dot makes the shooting easier. So then I got a red dot. But why I've stayed with a red dot in competition is just because that's where the competition is. That's where the majority of it is.
What do you always compete? Go ahead.
No, I mean, you show up to any level 2 or 3 match in the US, and there's going to be, most likely there will be a top 10 shooter in carry optics shooting that match. And so that's good.
I just shot a match this past weekend, and I was like 100-something people there, and the majority of them were shooting carry optics, and one person was shooting production. So at least I took first in production.
You were the one person shooting production.
It was good. It was good for my ego.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, I'm not connected enough to a division where I would just shoot it. I don't know. I mean, I think separating out, and you've shot plenty of carry optics too, so
it's fun. It is fun, but I find shooting production like challenging. I think You're right. You're right when you say that carry optics is, it's where it's a lot of the competition, and it does make the shooting easier. I think so. Now you're starting to get, as Steve would say, the better competitors are winning, not just the better shooters, but the better competitors are winning. But I think challenge-wise, I think production has more to it simply because it is a little bit more difficult in a sense, shooting with the irons, not the dot. And then also you got the 10-round capacity. You've got the, timing your reloads. It's not just, you can look at, it was funny listening to people. I got my big mag in there, so I have 24 rounds. I can shoot this whole stage without a reload. It's just like, if I don't make a mistake.
The interesting thing about production, and the kind of thing that I like the idea of, is that I'm assuming there are more places for people to separate themselves in the competition. So, in carry optics, you have like 3 arrays of 8 with targets that are 3 yards away. There's not a lot of room for someone in master class to separate themselves from someone in B class, because they're shooting the same speed at the targets, they're so close. But if you change it a little bit, where you add a reload element, you add some planning element in production, you also add iron sights, which are more difficult to shoot, or more challenging. It's like a different challenge. Then you add a place where someone could separate themselves, and that just grows exponentially as you make the shots difficult and you have good stages. And then you have an opportunity for someone who's really good to separate themselves from someone who is also pretty good, but maybe not as much. And so that is interesting to me, for people at the top to be able to separate themselves. That's very cool. And that happens at carry optics, but maybe not as much.
Were you always a very competitive guy?
I think so. Yeah. I remember being younger and feeling that very competitive. That there's the feeling that comes up, and with my brother and playing games at summer camp that I went to, and I think I always felt that.
Well, if anybody watches you on Instagram, your basement dojo that you've set up for your dry fire practice is very impressive. I mean, it's basically like a shooting bay, but indoors in your basement with all the things that you could possibly add to it. Where did that come from, and how did you figure out to do all that? Because most people that I know, they have the laser cut targets if they can, or they have regular targets. They put them around their room, and then they're just like, doing stuff, whatever, against the wall, but they can't recreate these stages that you could do in your basement.
Yeah, so I didn't start out like this. I started out in a pretty small area and was kind of limited on space and couldn't have a lot of wide transitions. It was just tricky to set stuff up. And then, we lived in an apartment for a little while, and again, very limited on space. And that was around the time, I think it was 2 or 3 years into shooting USPSA, and we were going to build a house. And so this house was built around kind of the idea of, I want to have a basement that is, for the most part, unobstructed, so that I can set up more things, more stages to practice on, and get the depth transitions as well, instead of just difficulty, so that you can have a target and then actually transition your focal depth, or your accommodation, or whatever it's called, further out and back, and be able to make things as realistic as possible for training. And so it was built kind of for that purpose, which it's kind of funny. My family used to always build houses, so that's what we did before farming. But I'm in a very fortunate situation to be able to build my own house and kind of design it however I want. And it was worked out between myself and my wife that I could essentially have the basement to myself. And so it worked out well.
Where do you get the ideas to set up this training? Because I know one thing we talked about last time was going to the range with one mag loaded, and that was it. So two-part question. The first part of the question will go to, do you still do that? And the second part of the question is, how do you come up with your training plan? Because you seem to have a variety of things that you're doing all the time and pushing yourselves. It's fascinating to watch, and I suggest I'll link his Instagram account down below, but you should check that channel out. So two-part question.
Yeah, so I am less restricted because I'm not building a house right now, so I can have more ammo to shoot. So things have opened up a little bit more, but I will still go out to the range, and usually, and it's just periodically where I know specifically what I'm going to test and what I'm going to try, and I'll take one mag with me, and I'll just go out and shoot. And then I get the information that I need, and then I can come back and dry fire. Most of the time I'm going out with and shooting, 100, 150 rounds or so. But that definitely was my approach early on, is to just go out. I'm testing one specific thing. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to pay close attention to it. And then I'm going to be able to go back and dry fire and replicate that. And then fix it in dry. And so that brings us to the part two of the question, is all of my training is really done in dry fire. Live fire is just where I make the problem happen, and then I find out how I can fix it, and then I fix it in dry fire. And so I guess an example of that would be pushing shots low to the left on a target in live fire. And so I'll go out, I shoot a target, and my shots are going low and left, which is really common. It still happens to me. And then I'll come back and dry fire, and it's fresh. So right after I shoot, I come back in and I dry fire. And if I can replicate that problem, then I can fix it. So if I see my dot flash to the left and low, then I can think, okay, geez, I'm clamping really hard with my firing hand, and I'm pulling the trigger with my whole hand. I'm also not gripping very hard with my left hand, and so therefore the shots are just going low and left. So then I can grip hard with my sport hand, and I can just pull the trigger with my trigger finger, and then my shots go straight in dry fire. But it's more subtle in dry fire when you notice it. And so you just have to pay attention to what the dot's doing or what the sights are doing. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense, but I'm a little incredulous, though, about the whole one mag, because unless you've got a 50-round magazine, how are you creating these problems over and over again with one mag that you know for sure, okay, this is what I'm doing? Because, it might take like a bill drill to see what's happening, when you're trying to shoot at speed, and that's 6 rounds, and that could be almost half your magazine.
Well, so I think you got it. When I shoot one mag, usually I'll shoot 2 runs on some type of drill. And so like a bill drill is a good example of that. The thing that's been really big for me this year is I'll go out. So if I'm going to shoot a bill drill and I'm only going to shoot it twice, I'm going to shoot the bill drill my first run as aggressively as I possibly can, so that I make a mistake, so that I notice a mistake right from the beginning. Because if I can go out and shoot a clean bill drill over and over and over again, and they can all be alphas and it'll be no problem. But I'm not learning anything by doing that. And so the key point for me, and it's been big this year, is I'll go out and I'll say, I'm going to shoot this bill drill in 1.7 seconds, and that's the mandatory time. So it's an aggressive pace, and that's just an arbitrary number or whatever. I won't usually set a time on it, but I'm going to push really hard, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and I'm going to make a mistake from the first run on it. And then if I make a mistake, I'll say, okay, I'm gonna do it again, and I'll see if I make that mistake again. Generally, I will. And then I know the mistake that I made, and then I'm done. Why would I shoot more bill drills? Then it's just wasting ammo. So then I'll go back and drive.
How far away is the range?
I mean, it's 20 yards away.
Oh, okay. So that's a little bit easier than the people who have to drive an hour to a range and then get there for one magazine.
Yes.
And have to go back home. That's tough.
If that was my circumstance, I would do it differently. I would dry fire more if I was further away from.
Okay, that kind of makes more sense.
Yeah.
So for obviously picking up Steve's books is a great place to start with shooting and getting better. I went from C class to A class just by doing his stuff 100%. But in terms of you seem to have a good sense of self-introspection and an idea of how to take when you see a problem and then coming up with your own solutions without having a trainer or instructor right there watching you. So you're lucky that way. How would you suggest other people do that?
So I think that it's easier if you're obsessed with the thing that you're trying to get better at. And so if you're obsessed with the thing that you're trying to get better at, meaning that you're thinking about it constantly, and maybe you've been thinking about it constantly for 6 years or whatever, then you get into a point where you're doing this so much that you're not thinking so specifically about what you're doing. You're just watching what you're doing, and you're aware of what you're doing. And that's where it starts for me. And I think it's extremely useful if you're shooting a drill and you're just watching what's happening, and noticing things, and not getting too tied up with the result on the target. So I don't know. It's tricky to talk about because I don't talk about it that often. But you're just aware of what's going on, and when you have that awareness, then you're able to identify what needs to be worked. And it's the same thing with matches. You'll go through, and even if you watch video afterward, you just watch it with a sense of awareness of what's going on. You're not judging anything. You're just looking at what's happening. And then you can see way more than if you just dial in on the results and think, well, I just have to shoot more alphas. Then how are you going to do that? You have to discover some way on how you're going to do that. And so awareness is totally where it starts. But it's tricky to teach. You can't teach awareness. I don't know. You teach a lot. You teach people, right?
Yeah. No, I totally get it. But I'm just curious because not often do you find people who are, so devoted, and I mean, like I said, you're not isolated, but you're definitely out on your own. You have your own setup. You know exactly how to fix your own problems. And I don't know if that happens just simply from experience, but I mean, you rose up pretty quick, and you don't shoot tons of matches. So obviously what you're doing works. So is that your greatest strength, you think, or what is your greatest strength?
I think it is I think it's probably learning quickly. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of what I do in my training, which is I make a lot of mistakes. I mess things up a lot. And that's where I learn the most. And that's what I get excited about too. Is when I make a mistake, then I'm very excited to figure out a new way to solve it. And I think it's tricky to put yourself in a spot where you're going to make a mistake, or you're going to push so hard that you do make a mistake, because we want to go out and we want to get a good score on target or hit factor or whatever. And then you do that, and then you just cut yourself off in the learning. And so I think that's probably where it is. It's just I shoot and make mistakes. I dry fire, I make mistakes. It's always pushing the limits and making myself really uncomfortable. And that's fun. It's really fun.
Now that Carry Optics Nationals is done for the year, you're like a one gun guy, because a lot of people in the sport will they'll shoot open, they'll shoot limited, they'll shoot single stack nationals, they'll shoot Carry Optics, and they'll shoot PCC. So they're shooting everything. They just like the shooting and the competition. But other people, they're just a one gun type person. So now that it's done, and I think you're a one gun guy, type of guy, what are you going to do?
I'm going to keep learning. I think if I would love to shoot more divisions and shoot more nationals and stuff like that, but I think that I would have to be in a different position. Like I care about my family a lot, and I care about being around them as much as I can be. And so it's simpler for myself to just say, these are the matches that I shoot, and I shoot this division, or whichever division. Like limited optics might be the next division that would have the most heat in it. That's what we're assuming. And so, yeah, it's simple for me to stay in one spot. And I still feel like I'm learning how to shoot this division. So if I ever feel like I've got it figured out 100%, that'll probably be the end of it. So I doubt that will happen.
So limited optics, huh? And what gun are you going to run for that?
The same exact gun. Because it's the same division. I mean, it's minor slide ride. I'll put a magwell on.
There you go. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
One last question. So for people who are in the sport and everybody wants to get better, if you can break down like one thing or two things for those people who are listening to this, what do you think people should work on?
I mean, I think if they want to get better, I'm just speaking for competition here, but I think that the idea is to be able to look at a specific place with your eyes, and then wherever the gun is, whether you're drawing it or transitioning it, that it lands precisely where you're looking. And so that would be the thing that I would practice. And so how do you practice that? I mean, then you go back to Steve's drills. And the first drill is to draw to a sight picture. So you look at a specific place, and then you draw and put the dot there. And then once you can do that, then you make yourself uncomfortable. And how do you make yourself uncomfortable? I think you add a timer to it. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And then once you can hit a certain time, then you've got to go faster. So I think drawing really fast and looking at a specific spot and still having the dot land there is the most, like, that's what I would do again. And that's what I do all the time still, because it's such a good skill to have. You're joining your hands together, and you're getting a good grip, and you're putting the dot exactly where you're looking in a really short amount of time. And that in itself is a transition. You're transitioning from the holster to looking at the target. And then other transitions are you have the basics down for other transitions as well. So that would be what I would work on. I would get really, really good at drawing very quickly to a good grip with the dot landing exactly where you're looking.
Okay. That sounds great. And hopefully people take that into consideration. Obviously you're not you're not teaching people, you're not doing that stuff.
No, I just have, it's funny. I think it's more of a verbal journal. On Instagram, I have like the subscription because they allow that now. And so that's my verbal journal. And so I people subscribe, and I think that I'm just sharing what I learned, what I'm doing in training, and what I think about it. And so I'm just sharing information. It helps me. I also keep a physical journal, but then that's the verbal journal. So what someone said that to me, this is like a journal. That makes sense. That is. So I'm pretty open about everything on there, and just share what I learn, and make video. Most of it's just like 10 or 15 minute videos on a training session, or just talking about a match, or things like that. So, but I don't teach classes. I don't really have an interest in that right now. It's just, I really like teaching myself.
I watched some of those, and all I have to say is the content is great, but you gotta worry about that headspace that you're using on that camera. You gotta be able to mount it so there's only just a tiny bit of head. You got like your head, and then there's like all the rest of your car. So we want to perfect that. Just like I want Steve to fix his audio, I want you to fix your video. Just have it so there's just a little bit of space left above your head, because that's just the natural way people look at people. They don't want to look down at people. If there's any questions for Jay, now's the time. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up so he can get back to training and being with his family. But here on Firearms Nation, we are just always glad that we can talk with Jay. I didn't make it out to Carry Optics Nationals, so I didn't get a chance to see you. It was fun that one time. I did get to see you at, I think it was COVID Nationals. So until the next time with that, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to the Firearms Nation.
Yeah, thank you, Arik. I really appreciate being on. I think we'll see you in Florida, I think, or maybe you will be at IPSC Nationals. That'll be down there.
You're doing that?
Yeah, I'll be there. That'll be good.
Okay. I'll see if I can finagle a way out there.
Yeah, all finagle away.
Finagle away. That's where I'm at these days. So anyways, everybody, thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to Jay Beal.
Inside.